There we go. Welcome to Where to From Here, new action-packed series where we discuss all things spiritual and hopefully we get something out of it, or at least make a little bit of sense. That's where I'd like to do.
All right, all right. All things spiritual. Well, we talk a lot of things spiritual. I don't know all things, uh,
Oh yeah,
and we definitely touch into the physical. That's where this journey is beginning in the here, right? So,
yes.
physical material is sort of a key part of our spiritual podcast, simply because that is the here from whence we intend to evolve.
So not quite 3D, not quite 5D. We're like what 4.5D? Is that new?
Uh, You know me in fours, so let's go with 4.4.
4.4. Okay, yeah. Hey, if they can make up something like Twin Flames, we can make up 4.4D.
100%. 100%. Actually, that kind of works into the topic or title of what we were kind of entering today's conversation with you saying that if they can make up this, we can make up that. It's a perfect intro to the title of
Consensus.
consensus reality. We live in a consensus reality. So
That
that's
we do.
our topic today.
Ooh, can I do the introduction for consensus reality?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
do it. Oh,
This is the Right Reverend Justin T. Matthews coming at you live from San Francisco Bay, California. Here we preach on, brothers and sisters. Yes, we preach the goodness, we preach the love, the eternal love that is emulated in our sister Alyson Nouné as she delivers words of wisdom upon us. And so bow your heads and accept in humble gratitude that which you are about to receive, the manna from heaven of wisdom dispensed by our own Alyson Nouné. Thank you. It so the guy on the boat said that this hat makes me look like a geriatric grandma lesbian on her way to war. Is this true?
wow, that's quite a description. I
Yeah,
can't say that
no.
that I can't say that was the first thing that
See,
came.
it didn't spring to my mind either. It was
It
just
did
sort
not
of
come.
like blocking out the sun, but like
No,
I'm
no.
trying to stay less red. As you remember, I was very red during the last little conversation we had. So hopefully
Yes.
that'll do the trick, and maybe I won't get hit on by geriatric lesbians on their way to war. I don't know.
Yeah, that would be I'd like
Although I'll bring the story to you next time we talk if it
I was
happens.
just gonna say, I'd like to hear that story. All right, well, let's see. So today marks the first time that we're entering a talk with a little bit of an idea of what we intend to talk about. Uh,
Ounce of preparation.
uh, Lots of preparation. Yeah,
1 ounce.
school lifetime has been our preparation for this talk. But I this sort of epiphany, and what's crazy is it's not that wild a statement to say that we live in a consensus reality, especially to anybody that's a little bit more aware, awake on the spectrum of consciousness. People be like, yeah, duh, we live in a consensus reality. But somehow it hit me and it struck me last weekend at, oh my, I have a low battery. Hang on.
Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and I'll take it over. Yeah. And what you're saying is entirely true because I was really surprised to learn that like America is one of the first countries that actually doesn't believe in like the collective unconscious or consensus reality because they were theorizing about it even back during the 1970s, and that was about the time that the 100th monkey theory came out, or we started to notice different species all learning together, or members of the same species, I guess, learning together. And other countries have been hip on this. And even when I was looking around, I found that there was something called Project Coherence. And basically, all that is a whole series of studies and experiments that were proving this consensus reality. And then they took it a step further in Project Coherence. Now, I would strongly encourage everybody to get on board with that because they took it a step further. And after proving consensus reality, they went ahead and decided to have create the 5D for a lack of a better word. Basically, they have entire days where people from around the world will focus together to try to pray into the earth or channel love or channel peace or channel harmony, and it has a measurable effect on the things that they're trying to influence. And we can get into a little bit later, but first I want to hear, now that you're plugged in, I guess I want to hear you finish what you decided on was your idea of consensus reality. Where is the here as far as Alyson goes?
Well, before I get on that, answering that specific aspect of it, I just wanted to share the story of how this phrase hit me in a different, kind of more profound way last weekend. I was working one of my favorite races, a little series that takes place in Florida state parks. And I love it because I'm a course girl. So I'm always the one on these running courses. I'm usually the one that's involved with setting the course. So playing around in the woods for 2 days, setting a half marathon and 10K and 5K is like, it's one of my favorite events of the whole year because I get to do my job in a way where I don't, it's like, it doesn't feel like work at all. And so I'm kind of already in a magical place when I'm working those races. So I was out in the middle of the woods on the golf cart on race day, and I was checking the course at 5:15 a.m., going out into the woods with about 6 inches of visibility in front of me and my knife on the side because there's wild animals. So it's always like an adventure to check the course and these woods ones. It's kind of fun. Jamie's like, do you want somebody to go with you? I'm like, no, man, I got my knife. I'm good. I'm good. Almost hoping to see a little bit of wildlife. So I'm coming up on the back end of the course, and I the night before I had trouble sleeping, and I have a subscription to this math YouTube channel, right? And all I can tell you, it was like I couldn't believe this post and all the disagreements in the comments about the order of operations for this math problem. And I'm reading, and people are just like seething at one another as they argue about this math thing. And I'm like, so I'm on the golf cart and I'm like, boy, have we gotten to a place when, as I'm thinking, you never would think you could disagree about math. 2 + 2 is 4. It's objective. There's no reason for us to debate. And all of a sudden, based on what I had read the night before, it hit me and I'm like, holy crap. Hey man, if enough people want to believe that 2 + 2 is 5, guess what? We live like because like that's how irrational the arguments were and how adamant people were about seeing this math problem in two completely different ways. And it's like we have gotten to a place where, honest to God, if enough people want to believe that 2 + 2 is 5 and create a reality in that way, they can. I mean, that's what we're seeing. That's exactly what we're in. Whereas, like, all is valid, everything's on the table. Whatever we all want to come together to agree to the most is what's going to dominate as the collective, the kind of the collective reality. And it just, I'm like, we live in a consensus reality. And it hit me in a way that, and then I shared a couple Telegram messages with you about it. And even when I shared it with you, your reaction sort of confirmed because it felt like it was a little bit like mine. Like, holy shit, yeah, that is like, it's everything. If we could just wake up and then understand enough that if we agree to do it differently, everything we're bitching and moaning about can fall away. It can fall away really quickly.
Yeah, there's several different aspects of this, right? And so and I agree with you, but see, well, I'm going to do what I normally do and kind of like take what you just said and make it my own. So math is just another kind of descriptive language. You know what I mean? Like in my heart of hearts, like I don't believe that two actually exists. Like because it's a way of describing something you're witnessing, right? So you could look at a landscape and say, look, there's two trees. And I would say like that's just a way of describing it, but what exists is actually just what exists minus description. Although description is wonderful because it's what creates the 3D reality we know and love. It's what birthed industrialization. But and actually there actually is quite a bit of descript of argument when it comes to math. Not 2 + 2 = 4. We got the basics. We all agree on the basics, but there actually are things that people do disagree upon, but that's neither here nor there. The point of it. And but yeah, it is and the basis of language is consensus, absolutely. And I would actually say, but people usually in our society, though, like I said, America is one of the few countries that still doesn't the scientific community still doesn't agree that the collective unconscious exists. And in our society, especially, we sort of draw this line in the physical, right? We're like, okay, well, there's descriptive analysis, and we can differ on that, or we could differ on the opinion of what a word means. But this line in the sand is physical matter. Physical matter is immutable, like they call it, like Newtonian physics, basically, like the physics of matter are immutable. And now that quantum is starting to eke into our sort of consciousness, the people are having scientists having to turn around and say yes, but and that but part of it, when they're getting into particle physics and all of the rest, and they're realizing that we actually really do, that our consciousness does play a key role in determining what is actually here, that in a material sense, actually, that our consciousness does create a pivotal role in determining what's here in the material sense, not just in terms of how we perceive it, how we interact with it. And there's been a number of things from the medical community now that our collective unconscious here in America is beginning to open up just enough to allow some of the stuff in. There's members of the medical community that are saying, like, no, the person's state of mind absolutely has to do with their prognosis and how well they recover from an illness. There's, like I said, the people in particle physics that are like, well, actually, the experiment changes depending on what the scientist, the person observing, expects to see happen. And there's and and our mind, our collective mind here in this country, is slowly opening to the fact that everything you said was true. And I have a personal and a much more woo woo uh the definition of the here. But first, before we get into that, I want to kick that back over to you. Does that make sense, that it's not only just the way we describe things that's consensus, but it's also like we have a definite, our perception definitely affects the material as well?
Oh, I mean, 100%, without a doubt. And I loved how you threw the math kind of on its head. That two is just, that's a perfect sort of example of it, to point out, you know, it can be challenging to bring voice and give to the essence. And you did an excellent job of describing that just now, with the fact of, because that's actually what aligns most with me, is that understanding that the energy of the belief of our thoughts, which I don't know that that is synonymous with consciousness, but certainly consciousness is not physical. So it's like that, where the energy is before it becomes physical, is the birth point of the physical. It's like that's where it begins. I used to listen to a little bit of this guy named Mike Dooley, and his little tagline was, he used to send out tut tut messages, thoughts from the universe, or something like that, something like that, tut messages and emails every day. And Mike Dooley's tagline was, thoughts become things, choose wisely. I mean, it's so this is definitely not something new that we're trying to bring, voice to here. This is a very common understanding, and has been throughout various, disciplines of spirituality and faith for a long time. But I think that's the more important aspect to sort of, well, you know what, they're equally important, right? Because if you don't know that that's the case, that our thoughts and our energy to what we're thinking becomes the physical reality, you just consent to the physical reality, just to what you see. So we do have to sort of give voice to both, the ways that that works in both ways, like give physical examples and then give more abstract theoretical examples, of which I could jump at and try once I throw it back to you.
Okay, yeah, I'll follow it down in that vein, because I do agree that it is both at the same time. Because you're never going to convince somebody that's being attacked by a bear that the bear doesn't exist,
Right.
and obviously, nor would I ever try to. And people always use the hard knocks of the physical to kind of um to establish that. And when you say it's all consensus reality, no, we're not creating the bear. Obviously, it's like it's everything happening at the same time. And how do I put it a different way? So it's they need a moment to actually be able to speak to that directly. But I would say it's the difference between, like, say, if somebody's trying to read, have you ever seen a painting done in Braille or a picture done in Braille? It has the dots all around it. And being that we have eyes, or we have the ability to see it, we can look at the picture and see the whole thing all at one time. We can take it all in all at once. Whereas we could also close our eyes and follow along the picture just line by line until we get an image of it. And we can drag our finger across it in a linear fashion, getting a ever increasing idea of the picture as we move across. And that point of contact between our finger and the picture is the 3D, right? The 5D would be just opening your eyes and seeing the entire thing at once. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. Um, oh God, I gave up coffee today, so my mind's not working very
Yeah,
well.
no.
But I would say the 3D is people allowing their exterior world to sort of create their internal reality, and the 5D would be taking charge of your internal reality and creating that yourself from the inside out. And the trick to it all is that actually it's not really a choice at all, because we're doing this every moment of every day. Everyone is actively doing this right now. Everyone is choosing the thoughts that they choose to think. Everybody's choosing the emotions that they choose to have. And that's why people react in different ways to the exact same stimuli. You know, it's what should be completely self-apparent to us, because you put two different people underneath the same conditions and they'll react to totally different ways. And even in the face of that, when processing it ourselves, we still choose to believe that the thing made us do it. And we still don't take agency. So what I would say to it is, a lot of it is, first you have to have the process to where, in order to see the scene as as it is, instead of seeing two trees in the description, first you have to learn silence. When you can learn internal silence, you can then see it for what it is, instead of having to describe everything, whether that be within words or mathematics or whatever. After you have the internal silence, then from that space, you can jump off and you can take complete and total responsibility for everything that you do. And the personal responsibility is key. It must be done, because that sort of puts you in the driver's seat. So instead of creating as a reaction, which is still a form of creation, you're just reacting, but you're still taking charge. And people believe that since they're reacting, that it absolves them from responsibility, and that's not true. That's another lie our society tells us. Just because you choose to react to something almost unconsciously still doesn't mean that it is not you that is reacting. So after the learning internal silence must come a place of complete and total responsibility, and then from there you're in the driver's seat, and then you could start experimenting, throwing the levers yourself, and you will begin to notice as you do that, as you think and feel, it does affect your choices and it does determine reality. It does.
Oh yeah, 100%. And as you were talking, I was kind of relating to what you were saying to my own journey. And you know obviously, looking back on my past of this lifetime, I've had an understanding in an unconscious understanding and awareness of a lot of these things since I was really, really young. But until I had what I call my point of no return spiritual awakening, I really don't think I can say that, because of that what you described is sort of the process I feel like I went through to get to that point of being in the driver's seat of my own car and getting out of the passenger seat of my car. Like, I want to be driving my own vehicle. And I just, until I had my personal, what I call awakening, which essentially was, I guess, the most simplest way to describe that is just finally a validation and an inner knowing that this reality around us was not all there was. Because I just have known there's so much more than this limited 3D. And my after seeking and seeking and doing lots of work, at November 18th, that was yesterday. I just realized yesterday was the 12 year anniversary, 13-year anniversary of this moment, where and then from that it accelerates, right? You have this understanding of yourself more as a soul, and you take more accountability and responsibility even for choosing to come down here in the first place. And that's a game changer when you start talking about the purpose with which one can live their life. When you're like, we don't choose our families, we don't choose. Yeah, we do. From a soul level, like, humbly, I believe that's a universal truth. I mean, that's my perception, is that we are so much more than Alyson and Justin. We are a greater part of all that is, that chose a very specific lifetime to come into, with a focus of that consciousness, because that's even what our personalities are a focus of consciousness. So there's all these different layers to it, and it's ultimately bringing, I feel like, the higher dimensional down to our 3D vessel, and learning how to really understand to what degree we have this free will, what that even really, really means. The free will. And right now, I would argue there's a lot. My journey has been dominated by making my free will choices that were best for the new version of me that I understood, and almost every choice was going against something that the consensus reality of the world around me was telling me was wrong, or I can't do it, you're too much of a dreamer, you're too idealistic. So it's a very kind of nuanced game of energy and focus of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to always say what passes for reality is usually repetition in disguise. And that's very much, it's just because we get into these almost patterns, habitual patterns of thought. And what they are is it's really, you're always in, like, your mind is always in the past or the future. It's analyzing what just happened or what happened in the past for the purpose of predicting the future, either for the purpose of avoiding pain or pursuing pleasure. And if that's all we're doing, or rather if we get stuck in that sort of loop of always analyzing the past and predicting the future, we get stuck in this sort of like descriptive analysis of the world. And it's just a description. It's not actually what's going on, but we can almost become trapped in our head, like walled in this box of thought. When that But it produces these habits that we have, and it produces these routines, and then we live these routines to try to get a predictable result, and we're trying to make our lives as predictable and routine as possible, and then we mistake this routine for like reality. It's like we feel like we're like trapped like it with, but we're the ones that created it all the way, every single stone, every single block, every single bridge. And that's the 3D in a nutshell, is a perpetual description, moment to moment description, not allowing for any space of silence or reflection at all, but a moment to moment description of the world for the purpose of predicting the future to either pursue pleasure or avoid pain. And that way of getting through reality is okay, but it's boring at the same time. And it also robs us of a great deal of our power, because I do agree with you. The majority of us is actually energy. The majority of us is energy. And it's like remember when you were a kid, like, you used to stick your head face in a bowl of water. And it's just a bowl of water, but as soon as you do it, it blocks out every other sense. So even though the greater part of you is sticking out of a bowl of water, your perception is dominated by that bowl of water. And if you stay there long enough, and yeah, and it can kill you, and it dominates your perspective, and it almost blocks out the rest of you, the totality of your being, when you're in that moment. And you can blow bubbles if you want to, but coming to this earth is like a lot the same thing. Like, yeah, we voluntarily chose to stick our head in this bowl of water. But yeah, the majority of us is still sticking out in the back. You know what I mean? And we'll rejoin there. And so I see it, especially when I'm in meditation, I'm reviewing my life. I see it almost as like I said, that finger moving across the braille, and that's our life in a linear fashion and how we perceive it normally. But our higher self, or the vibratory self, sees it all as a picture. And almost as we're dragging our finger across that, we're almost like leaving a bit of our essence behind. And that little bit of our essence can be that when our life is done, it's like we've used our energy across this entire streak, and that's what's created the picture. And then when we die, that force of that force of infinite love, that force of complete and total love. I don't know the word I'm looking for. Unconditional love. The force of unconditional love sort of just collects all of that energy back into itself and makes everything okay. It doesn't matter the pain that we've had, doesn't matter the joy. It just takes up those experiences. But within this life, we don't have to wait to die to have that happen. If we invite that unconditional love into our right now moment, and also into our past selves, and on our future selves, that's kind of like 5D. I know this is going to sound very, very woo, but this is actually true. And like part of that website that I talked about, Project Coherence, I really urge people to go check that out, because they've actually done studies with this where they found that prayer not only affects the right now moment, but actually affects the past as well. And it also stands to reason, if it can affect the past, then it can affect the future. And I feel like I got to back this up for people that are just like, the F is this guy talking about? Because like you said, a lot of people will hear this, and to some people, what I'm saying, they'll just be like, yeah, and water's wet and the sky is up. Like, they're already there. They already understand it. But for people that don't, they gave a group of people that were well trained in prayer a list of names that they could choose from, a huge list of names they could choose from. Be like, just choose one. That people picked names off this list of prayer, and they said, this people are in the hospital. So whoever you pick is the person you're going to pray for. And they did. And the people that they picked were markedly better. All the people that these prayer warriors picked to pray for were markedly better. The thing is that list that they got from was from a hospital in like the 1950s. So yeah, so the people that they prayed over were the ones that were better. They didn't tell these people that this is a list of people that had already come and gone and died, that were just in a hospital during this time. You could pick whoever you wanted to pray for, and the people they picked to pray for got markedly better. And the ones and they could go back and look at the hospital records and see, yeah, these people got better, and it already happened, but they were being prayed over right now in the right now moment.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you said a lot there, and I'm going to go in reverse to sort of count like speak to what you just shared in that example. Well, I mean, I don't know how many of the folks listening may or may not know, but I've followed the 13 moon calendar now for over 13 years. And the essence, I mean, there's many, many, many layers of the calendar, but the essence of it is essentially saying the tracking, the current way of how we track time in on this planet, in this time space dimension, is single-handedly what's got us so disconnected from source to begin with, because it's so mechanical and artificial, and linear couldn't be more false. Time is spherical. So like as you say, how they have this healing, it's like it pierces through. I always kind of see it as infinite bunk beds, or kind of layers kind of up to the sky. Like dates are a good way that I experience, what sort of what your story just was. It was like something in the present, almost touching in with the same frequency of it in the past, but it's all right now. It's just sort of finding that connecting point down that connects it all, like, and for me, I use dates. So like yesterday, today, 13 years ago, I was still in insane bliss of my spiritual awakening, almost instantaneously knowing how big what I was experiencing exactly 13 years ago. I can touch into that as if it was right now, because from a certain perspective, it is the right now moment, because all of existence in reality is the right now moment. And it's just sort of finding the connecting points, piercing it through the idea of that, all of that being spherical instead of linear. It's all right here in an infinite ball of all that's ever existed, all that exists now, and all that will ever exists right now, just from various frequency vibrational levels. So that's a beautiful story that sort of depicts that. But the 13 moon calendar I follow kind of has I've done a lot of work already, sort of deprogramming myself from that particular consensus reality, how everybody agrees to track time, and the calendar we follow and all of those things. That was one of the first things that I pulled out of the consensus reality in a certain degree, at least on my like openness to encourage myself to try something different and see how it resonated with me, a different way of looking at time, a different way of understanding it. And that was a game changer for me, in huge ways. And earlier you were talking about the silence, being in the silence, and present in the moments. And that made me think of a quote that I literally found 5 minutes before we started, by Alan Watts. And I was going to use this quote when I started to give voice to the there, like how I see the there of different ways I would love to be part of a different consensus reality amongst my, fellow Americans and fellow earthlings. I was going to use the power of reversing what this quote is sort of pointing out. Alan Watts says, stop measuring days by degree of productivity and start experiencing them by degree of presence. So stop
Mm.
measuring them for productivity and start experiencing them by degree of presence, which was like exactly what you were just talking about, and exactly why we're in this funky place in the world, because we have a world that won't stop, that the collective mainstream energy believes that productivity and action and doing is the be all end all. We don't stop. There's no silence. But the greater truth of things is that the degree of presence and experiencing life is at least as important as that. And we don't live in a world that really gives a lot of space for that.
Oh yeah, that's why I always laugh my ass off whenever I listen to Abraham Hicks. So like so the Project Coherence that I was talking about, Joe Dispenza is the guy that creates that. And I was just listening to one of his audiobooks. And he is amazing and actually does a much better job of talking about this than you or I. So anybody that really is interested, I would highly recommend going and looking up Joe Dispenza. And if you're a sciencey person, that's the one to go to. I've always steered away from it because I'm more of like, in my heart of hearts, I'm more of like a woo-woo religiosity kind of person. Like I don't need to know the why. I just notice that this is here and it works and I feel it, and that's just totally fine for me. I don't need to understand like the Trinity. I'm just like, no problem. you know. But But with Abraham Hicks, she's really, really good at getting encouraging people to make it a daily practice as well. And the thing that I love the most about Abraham Hicks is exactly what you were just talking about, where it's just like getting people involved, where it's like she almost has to use like stuff to motivate her audience, because everybody that's there is there for like financial abundance, you know what I mean? And so she gets up on stage and she's talking to people like, now look, I'm about to teach you a method in which you can connect with your divine purpose. You can feel a level of centering and compassion for yourself and the world around you that you've never before known. You can walk in perfect bliss and grace and alignment, being totally content and at peace with everything you are and everything you will be, because you're never going to get it done. It's never going to be over, and you came here joyously and you will leave joyously, and you'll love every minute of it. And everybody's like, can I get a Ferrari out of it? You know what I mean? It's like he's just like, all right, who wants a Bentley? All right, forget everything I just said. Take everything I just said about fulfillment and life's purpose and being happy and being in line with source. Replace all that with Bentley. Got your attention now? All right, so let's talk about how you get your Bentley. It's like,
Yeah.
I always just love that, because yeah, you can never, like, if I was to, like, if I had some sort of demonstratable something, like, like he said, well, Abraham Hicks is the perfect example. What she's offering is actually just invaluable. Um, and everybody just wants the Bentley, man. Everybody wants the Bentley. Like, okay, enough of this shit. Like,
Yeah,
how do I get those lotto numbers? You know what I mean?
yeah, it is funny because I don't I try to avoid categorizing or generalizing or speaking to stereotypes and things like that. But in our human 3D realm, that is sort of a net. We're so inundated with information that the categorization and how our brain does that. I mean, it's sort of essential for us to not have our minds just like literally blown in this. We've got to sort of synthesize and do those sorts of things. But I was going to say my observation and experience, like with Abraham, I was a huge Abraham Hicks fan for a number of years. And I credit listening to Abraham Hicks, who has oodles and oodles and oodles of free stuff on YouTube. Is it definitely helped me rewire my brain. Without a doubt, I listened to Abraham every day, probably for a good year and a half to 2 years, and sometimes like hours on end, because she's hilarious. And for those that don't know, Abraham is it's this woman named Esther Hicks who stands on a stage and claims that it's higher consciousness coming through her that she's essentially channeling, and they ask to be referred to as Abraham. And I actually, when I first moved to Seattle, 3 days after I arrived on the evening of June 29th, and July 3rd, Abraham Hicks was in Seattle, and I had bought tickets, and I went to Abraham Hicks, and this was at the peak of when I was listening to her. So I literally was in that conference room and saw, and I had imagined how it would look. And it was exactly like I thought. She kind of comes on stage. She's Esther for like a couple of minutes, if that. And then she just kind of centers herself and calms herself and gets connected. And it was, it was a pretty cool experience. But I did notice as then I continued to kind of just grow and evolve on my journey, I was drawn to a different guy named Bashar, very different sort of channel. And once I started to listen to Bashar's audience did not sit down in the hot seats and ask questions about material things. They were asking, and I'm not trying to judge the Abraham folks, but I definitely kind of saw like an evolution of who was drawn to, just sort of the frequency and how she was talking about it. And again, that's what she's doing. Abraham is fantastic. If we can get people, even if they're pursuing material things, to understand that their consciousness and their attention, that they're understanding their role in it more than they did before, to me that serves everything. If we could elevate it, see, elevating it makes it seem like I'm judging it, and I don't want to judge it. I don't want to judge folks who love their material things. I don't love material things. I love experiences and connecting and the co-creative process. And I'm like, why stop at just like creating a mug? Let's watch it how we can create a whole new world, which is exactly what's at our feet right now.
Oh yeah, and I wasn't. Yeah, and I firmly agree with you. And I wasn't poo-pooing Abraham or the crowd whatsoever. I always, because I love it. I still love
Oh
listening
yeah.
to Abraham, and I'll check out Bashar. But And I think that she provides an invaluable service. This is one that I can't do whatsoever. Like I sometimes help a friend of mine that does plant medicine ceremonies, and he charges what I think is way too much. Like I like when for me it's I never charge, but I'm also very exclusive about who I allow because we're there for a purpose. You know, I don't want newbies. You know, I want people there that can set an intention and we can work on the intention. But people like Abraham, people like my friend are very, very good about taking somebody that's just showing up because they're curious, because their soul is beckoning them, you know, because they've been successful in the world and they realize that it's not all it was cracked up to be, or at least they did it and they're like, now what? You know, like, okay, I got the house and I got the car and I got the job and I got the spouse and but I still sense that there's just some greater part of me that's not
Yeah.
involved in any
Yeah.
of it. You know, what is
Yeah.
that greater part? And so people like my friend and people like Abraham, they're absolutely invaluable. Whereas I would much rather work with a very small but centered group of people. And so that actually brings me around to my idea of there. So I think we pretty much flushed out the here right now. We're both in total agreement about it that everybody's actively creating their reality, whether they're aware of it or not, whether they're doing it consciously or not, or whether they even want to admit it or not or take responsibility for that, and that we're all doing it together, and that's what produces the whole, but that it also exists quite outside of what we traditionally think of, because it exists outside of time as well. You know, it exists outside of all of it. We're like that point of contact of the finger upon the sheet of braille, you know, and then some of us can just sort of like peek one eye open and see it, you know, for what it is as a whole. But my idea of the there is actually capitalizing upon that, because I do believe, like, I make daily prayer part of my practice, and I don't do it out of habit or that because I feel like I should. I don't feel like there's anything should be done. I do it because one, it enlivens me, and two, I think it's almost like the purpose that we're put here for. Because human beings and a couple of the species on this planet, like, we have the oh, it says my internet connection is unstable.
Yeah, yeah. I was just gonna point that out. You started to fade out, but then it came back.
Well, I'm on a boat at Anchorage in San Francisco Bay, so we're at anchor right now, so I don't have nearly as good of connection. Let me get closer to the window, the porthole.
You're coming through okay right now.
Okay. So humans, we have this ability to be able to select the feeling we want. And I don't mean emotion. Emotion is a reaction to a feeling. Like, we perceive everything as a feeling first and foremost. And but humans, we have the ability to choose from infinity and select the feeling that we want to have, and that is how we influence creation. So no, if the bear is charging you right now, that is the right now moment. It is existing in the right now moment. But if we are able to enter a state of silence, if we are able to have the totality of ourself, like none of ourselves lingering the past, like none of our energy in the past caught up in trauma or obsession, and have the totality of ourselves in this right now moment, we were able to look into the future and select the feeling that we want to have. And based on the level of our intention, will determine how readily we can influence the reality as it moves towards us. Does that make sense?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yes, and that's basically what it all is about, is selecting the feeling that we want to have from the oncoming infinity.
Yes. Yes. And then trusting in how the process unfolds to deliver to you in your life the specifics of what that feeling looks like what that feeling comes to you as in your various parts of your life.
Yeah, that's actually part of my process. Is first I go into the what I call the void. But basically, when I disconnect from everything, I become nothing. Like, I'm no longer just, and I'm just floating in an endless space of consciousness. And then from there, I gather the past to me with that unconditional love. Like, I allow the unconditional love to move into all the past aspects of my life, and then that brings the totality of me into present. Then I look into the future and decide the future that I want to have, as a agent of love, for lack of a better word. But I can sense the feeling of it as exists in the future, and I draw that to me and channel that to me, and then from there into the earth. And that's my idea of there. I would love to see all of us doing that on a daily basis. And there's people doing it right now in the Himalayas. And I actually have a story after I want to hear your version of there. But I actually have a story of when I experienced a group of people doing exactly this when I was out on Hopi. But that's my idea of there is all of us being conscious of it, all of us learning how to cultivate a space of silence, all of us learning how to free ourselves, use unconditional love to free ourselves from our past, and also use unconditional love to select the future that we want, and then take that and channel it into creation.
I can't disagree with any of that. I'm one in on that reality. And to be honest, I mean that's what I set out to do 11 years ago with the company of me. I had my awakening, then you can't shut it off. You can't unring a bell. And when you start to understand the magnitude to which we've given our power away in the current sort of mainstream ways, the limitations we've unnecessarily set upon ourselves in this current reality, and then you have a blowing open experience that puts you, I call it my point of no return. I cannot go backwards and settle for the limited pathways that existed for me to be that new understanding. There was nowhere for me to live that at the extent that I was ready and willing to live right then, and I was just getting started. So I leapt in, started a company of me with beginning with being bold enough to state, this is what I intend to create for myself. I intend to one day be able to fully support myself, putting myself out in the world, doing work in a way that I fully control, where I get to communicate what my skill sets and my strengths are to come to a team, where I get to say and work with somebody to negotiate how I can best be used. Because rest assured, no company ever knew how to use me in a way that pleased me. They knew how to use me to serve them. And now that I had that understanding, I could not settle, and knowing to what degree it was possible. And before I could see it, of course I dream about it in a societal, society wide, where we're all doing this, but it had to begin with my journey of saying and putting that vision out there. In your example of when you go down to the future of in your meditation, how are you trying to channel the energy? What are you trying to then draw back into you? I've been doing this has been, no exaggeration, my full-time job, right? Full time. I do this every day for over 11 years while trying to balance and work a regular 3D world to keep my physical world alive. And the stuff I've experienced in 11 years, trust me, being an owner of a home was never, ever, 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 ever on the radar screen. And not that I fully believe in that, right? Because I don't think it's good to have a mortgage and to give these bankers their money to play with. I can't stand it. I don't believe in the debt society. I think it's extremely limiting to our human spirit. It's one of the things I'd like to see us come to enough of us to consent to agree to see it differently and believe we can do it differently. But in the current 3D reality, owning a home in the situation I have, buying it what I did and where it's at right now, has proven to be a pretty fucking amazing decision. And it wasn't easy, and I didn't have any support really cheering me on for that. It was extremely risky. And here I am, by some miracle of spirit, still standing on, after I sort of dedicated my whole life to this idea of what you described that you do in your meditation process. And then eager as can be to find other playmates and take it out into the world and begin to build that mass reality where this is the representative truth. We don't have to wait till we die. No, we can fix so many of the ails and problems. I'll always come back to Einstein's quote: you cannot solve problems from the same level of consciousness that created them. You must see the world anew. If we were to actually approach the problems of this realm from the place that we're speaking of, game changer. It's a game changer. So the process it's amazing, but it's hard to do within, because there's just not a lot of understanding and support of, at least not in, I haven't found a lot of I haven't found work opportunities where instead of having to put myself back into the 3D to the extent that I do, which kind of takes me out of that higher realm, I would love to find work opportunities that serve sort of where I am here. And that sort of touches back into what I think we were trying to throw around in ideas last week's episode, when we were talking about looking at work and businesses and profit sharing, and really just trying to get out of the box and take this idea of co-creation with our consciousness and with God, spirit, universe, cosmos one. Let's take it for a ride.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that I'm going to go ahead and do that and jump in like as you did with how you started your company, me, and you started the investment. So I can definitely leverage this place to get resources quickly if I just basically move onto the boat and don't leave. But I feel as if that's not the only way, that I can do something a lot more in line with like what you're describing. But I haven't sussed out, like I have the feeling of it, but I haven't sussed out what the material of it will look like yet. But I definitely am being led by a feeling that is I don't have to rely on this for my sole means of the finances, that and that it will work, that yeah, that property can be purchased, the community can be either entered or formed around a profit sharing business model, and that if the selection process is done well, that will be entirely successful, and it will be a successful model of a profit sharing business in which it's collective ownership and true ownership, where there's no employees, it's just collective ownership and shared on a profit basis. And that would absolutely be a lot more in line with what I see. I think we're moving from like a pyramid to a circle, like right now and historically for thousands of years. Like they've keep trying to align society in terms of a pyramid, this top down approach where everything's funneled to the top, and reality itself is formed much more like a circle with everything being interconnected, and our systems should reflect that. Like
Yes.
nature automatically reflects that type of system, that circular system. Yet us being us, we tried to improve the wheel, and have been failing at it for thousands of years, and didn't learn it with the Tower of Babel, still haven't learned it with the Twin Towers, but sooner or later we'll realize that the flaw is inherent in the system. But or maybe we won't. Maybe we just have to create that circular system that makes the pyramid structure obsolete.
Yeah, I definitely think it's I don't know how if it's a matter of continuing to follow the energies that call us to be more, and to be more, and to create more as that unified circle, understanding the interconnectedness of everything. And we pop onto a different timeline, we pop onto a different version of Earth, or it just ships it here and brings everything with it. That's more what I also, that's what I would love to be part of. I feel like that's the, well, I don't know what would be gentler and what's easier. I just, right now, I think why I feel like why the energy, at least within me, came to sort of take the next step with this podcast, and being courageous enough to kind of have these conversations and put them out there, was because I do feel like humanity, I think we've been on a choice point. I mean, it's always a choice point, as you pointed out so aptly earlier. We're constantly making choices, whether we're aware of it or not. We're making choices, infinite number of choices every day. But sort of collectively, with where we're at in our current here, we don't have to feed. We don't have to continue to feed the fear and the divisiveness and the anger and the power structures that are. We don't. We have a choice. And I just being not unafraid to state that, because I'm telling you, I state sometimes things like that seem to me on everybody's team like I'm not in any side, and it still seems to piss people off that are adamant about the sides. Like it's astounding to me. But now I think I have to just be a little bit more unafraid to really stand in it, because I have, it hasn't been lived easy. But I'm telling you, and Justin, this more than most, to what degree I'm holding myself to my own words and what I've done for 11 years. And not many, I don't know, it was a very, very, very real leap of faith, a real huge leap of faith. And the miracle after miracle that has me where I am, it's kind of just astounding. And all I've ever wanted to do was share, because to me, I'm like, it is so astounding how quickly we could change the mass reality if just every individual really understood even just a teeny weeny bit more, like how much we get to make it up. We can just say no and say yes to something else. And it doesn't mean we all have to figure out the way that there are people that have been working on the behalf of this in the physical for a long time, long before me and you. And so there's energy that we're building upon, but we are fast approaching that 100th monkey. I know we are, the critical mass of energy. And to begin with, you have to believe it's possible. Even if sharing in this way gets people just believe it's possible, can you just open yourself up a little bit? And even if we just crack every little bit, it's going to help us get to that breakthrough point where it finally pulls us out. Or it's not. Or we're going to continue to make it really long and ugly and hard and war and death. We've done that. We know that pretty well. We can go down that, path again, but we have a choice.
Well, and people are, so yeah, because definitely the next evolution is going to be the evolution of consciousness. First, I want to say though that, like, yes, your integrity and your commitment to the goal makes me feel like a slacker and a half, to be totally honest. I've never known anybody as committed to this as you are, and you have a level of commitment that I wanted to evidence when I was a kid and still do, but for some reason I struggle with quitting coffee. All right, let's be honest here. You know what I mean? Like and two, and you're right, and I do think that the next expansion is definitely one of consciousness, because let's face it, like, how many more iPhones could we possibly have? You know, what are they at like now? Like, well, this one has 24 megapixels instead of 22. I mean, they're running out of gimmicks. They're really running out of gimmicks. Like, next year's stuff is going to be the exact same as this year's stuff. The only place left to go is consciousness. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And
Yes.
because the really revolutionary technologies are only going to appear after we have that shift of consciousness. Not
That's
saying we
right.
couldn't even have them right now, but
That's
they're
right.
not coming until we have that shift of consciousness, because they would never be allowed in the first place. So
That's
stop
right.
looking for it. The only thing they're going to give you is your next iPhone, and it's no different than the one you got right now. The next thing that we need is a change of consciousness. So I would thoroughly, and not, and of course people have families and everything like this. And I'm not saying everybody's got to run off and join an intentional community, but the one thing that absolutely everybody can do right now is exactly what you're saying right now. Like, go check out Project Coherence, and there's probably much more. That's just the one that I found when I was doing my reading. But tonight, right now, everybody can begin taking part in this consensus reality, because we already are. That's the thing.
Right.
Even saying beginning is wrong, because you are already taking part in the consensus
Right.
reality. It does exist. It's been proven time and time again. Like, our country is just one of the last to get on board with the idea. Everybody in quantum theory is already well on board with this. So you are already collectively creating reality. The only
Yes.
question is, what is the quality of the reality in which you're creating? That's really the only question we have. And there's meditation, there's public speakers, there's the people like Bashar, there's the people like Abraham. There's a line of people, many of which free on YouTube, that you can listen to, that can help you improve the quality of reality that you're creating. And I believe it's almost integral. It's what we came here to do. Like, we chose to be born as humans. Like, we're almost like the priesthood of this planet. We chose to come here as a human, and not as a bear, and not as a leopard or anything else, but because as human beings, we have the ability to select the reality, to select the feeling, the vibration, the feeling of the vibration of the reality that we want to draw to us in that oncoming infinity as it's coming into the right now moment. We can do that. Or just to make it simple, you can, in a spate of silence, align with your own higher purpose and feel better. Who wants to feel better? Why take a Xanax when we have hard baked into ourselves the mechanism for doing it intentionally, automatically, and naturally? And that process will help the whole. You'll help everyone around you, and you'll help the earth itself by doing it naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is not, the other thing about this is it's not something that can be forced upon others, nor is it something that you would ever want. The whole point of it is, in my opinion, it's that free will piece. Humanity collectively is still going to get the shit that we keep acting out collectively, because it's like what you said. When you look in the mirror, the image will only smile back at you if you smile first. You have to do the smiling. We have to be the ones that are the change. I don't care how cheesy it is. Gandhi's quote: be the change you wish to see in the world. JFK: ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. What are we able to do? Look and examine your life and see, where are you settling for something. Don't worry about anybody else outside. God, and that's all the powers that be have our energy so directed. I have had my hands full for every minute of the 11 years since I've this point of no return awakening, aligning and keeping my own crap aligned, dealing with all the wounds that keep opening up. Like, no, man, I don't have the time or the energy, nor would I want to. I can't control other people. We've got ourselves. Really begin to examine yourself at the, and just see the smallest of choices. As you pointed out earlier, this isn't about everybody, quitting their jobs and closing their IRAs and, doing wildly silly things. I mean, you can if you want, but it's just about sort of trying to get connected and be open to the fact that we all came here to play a specific role on Team Us. We really did. And rest assured, it isn't sitting in a cubicle, working for Amazon or, any of those, and Microsoft, any of these companies. There's so much energy that's being channeled in ways that could serve so much more. And but it's a level of, again, we say it again, personal responsibility, personal accountability, of understanding and wanting to take on that role of being more responsible for the reality that you're creating and that you're part of. But we can do so much better. We can do so much better than what we see, but we cannot do it unless we take that ownership of being the ones that create it. As long as you turn to something outside of you to create what your reality is, you will be at the whims of that at some point, and it will have limitations set upon you as part. It's just, I don't know. I guess there's plenty that don't want to do it, but
Well, there's a lot there. Yeah, so I see it more as in terms of like a why not. But in order to get to the why not, so the reason why it is the way it is, like the pyramid that we have, is because people are actively encouraged not to take that responsibility, not to take that sense of ownership. And a lot of people will actually kind of like pull away from everything I'm saying right now. So first, let me say that I see it more as a terms of why not, like because there's no should. You absolutely have the free will, and there's no judgment. The force that moves through all things does not judge us whatsoever. We can do exactly whatever we
yeah.
want. The force of the free will. The thing that's keeping us doing what we're doing right now is us. Is us. The thing that's dragging around that past behind us is us. Like, the universe wants us to put it down. It's our attachment to it, because at one point in time we're dragging it around because we think it's important. One, because we're either attached to it because we can't let it go because the pain hurt us and we imagine we want some sort of justification, or because we're traumatized and we don't want it to ever happen again. So we think that by dragging it around we're going to be able to predict it the next time it's come around, but it never works. It always comes right back around to slap us in the face again and again and again and again because we're holding on to it. And it's the craziest thing in the world, because we should be so ready to let that stuff go, yet we're not. We're really not. We're almost like traumatized as a society. And that's why I say the biggest thing to do is first, it really is a process, and that is the process that I utilize. And not like I'm, like I said, I'm struggling with quitting coffee. Like, I'm not like, I'm just saying this is what I do that's got me to where I'm at, as I center in the right now moment with meditation. I would encourage everyone to learn meditation, some form of meditation, whatever puts you in that state of mind that's required. Then from that space, you invite the unconditional love into your life that exists in all things that we're directly connected to. And that's what we want anyway. You know what I mean? That's what we want anyway. That's what we wanted when we were originally hurt. The lacking of that is what caused the trauma in the first place. The lacking of it is why we're dragging that piece of ourselves behind us. And that piece of ourselves that doesn't feel that unconditional love is what's causing us to repeat the pattern in the future. It's what's causing us to not take personal responsibility. It's what's causing us to not want to get in the game. It's what's causing us to not want to get our feet on the ground, because it's still suffering, and it's busy suffering. And while it's suffering, it doesn't want to hear any of this shit. But it's not some outside force that's like some deity that's like, I want you to pray to me. That's what we were built to do. That's what our souls naturally want to do. If you were able to let go of the past and the shit that's keeping you back, you would naturally want to do everything that we're talking about right now. It would come out of your soul all on its own. And so that's why I say it's important to take personal responsibility, to learn inner silence, to be able to allow the feeling of unconditional love into your past, into your present, then into your past, and then look forward into the future. Because that's the only way that we're able to really let that go and become conscious creators that I've found so far. There's probably a lot more ways, but that's just the way that I found personally. And once we're at that space, then we could start intentionally creating. And this is why I say why not, because we're doing it anyway, right? You're not getting away with anything by recreating your past. You're not getting away from anything by ignoring this process or just not taking responsibility. It doesn't matter whether you consciously decide to take personal responsibility. You are still responsible. You can't escape that responsibility. It's just a question of whether or not you acknowledge it.
You
You
will.
are actively creating it in every right now moment. You can't escape that. It's just a question of whether or not you're acknowledging it. So let's just stop shitting ourselves for the sake of our own trauma and just acknowledge these things as true and move on from there. Where to from here? Where to from, that's where we're at right now. That's the space we're at. We're all dragging around trauma. It's okay. We're all in the exact same boat. Where to from here?
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, I like to say sometimes I repeat to myself when if I start slipping down into, and there's nothing wrong with having feelings that are a little lower. When we all have the wounds pop back open, we're all bouncing back and forth, between better days and worse days. So it's not that all pain gets eliminated. It's just you recognize you get to say enough is enough. I get
Yeah.
to say enough is enough. And I remember not really until my awakening, I did not consciously understand to what degree I was perpetuating my own drama. I had no, I couldn't believe it. And I couldn't believe
Yeah.
it. And that all kind of like, and what you said is so perfect because it really is almost automatic. I don't, it's hard to explain. Like it just sort of happened when you're finally ready to lay down and stop battling yourself and stop holding on to this story that's not serving you. And you finally let it go. There's waves of forgiveness, of lightness, of you just open, it's like the clouds clear sort of thing. And it really does happen almost without, your job is to just say enough is enough, I'm done.
Yeah, yeah, and here's the kicker. Everything that we're describing right now is going to happen one way or another. It's going to happen when you die. When you die and your shell gets cracked and that invading force floods in you, that
Right.
invading force is unconditional love. So
That's
when
right.
you die, it's going to come through, cleanse all of that, take up all of those past experiences, collect all of that energy, love it unconditionally. Everything that you're denying yourself right now is going to happen. My thought is like, why wait till death
Yes, 100%.
to experience that, when
Right.
by allowing it right now in the right now moment,
Yes.
we can then become conscious creators of our future instead of stuck recreating the past. Wait, I'm feeling, wait, hold on. Geriatric lesbian, hold on. Right, Reverend Justin T. Matthews telling you that you too will die one day. And when you do, this invading force of unconditional love will enter your life, as we've seen in our sister Alyson Nouné here today. So, yes, we want you to remember our congregation. We love you dearly. We're not asking you for money. We're not saying leave everything to us in a will, although you can if you want to. We'll put it to very good use. But you too will die.
That's a good place to end. That's a good place to end.
Okay.
Maybe not. I don't know.
No, I'm good there. I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think I've said everything I have in mind to anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I just think, and you know what? How about we let the words of Abraham always said, choose the highest flying disc. Bashar used to say or says, follow your greatest passions and take it as long as you can. And then when that wave crashes, hop on to the next passionate. It is following the feelings of joy and trusting that can guide and lead us. Our pains and our wounds do not need to have the driver's seat. We're not we're not to martyr ourselves in that way does not help the next person wound less. Letting it go and really believing that our joys, because that is the love, and that is what we are, and letting more of that come in to this physical reality. Telling you, a world based in love does not look anything like the world based in fear that we are experiencing. And you can begin to experience it individually. I'm eager for more of the collective, but in the meantime, we have the power to feel that individually and figure out your own way, because it's a good thing to feel. And the more you do it, the more you want of it.
Yes, I'm not putting on the hat again, but I will say the Right Reverend Justin T. Matthews says, yeah, become an agent of love.
Yes.
That's absolutely become an agent of love. Yes.
Yes. All right. I guess that's it. We'll see you next time.
All right.